5 years imprisoned and forgotten, his mind fights to survive. When a chance to escape presents itself, he discovers that the worst prisons are the ones you don't see. His fight is not just for freedom, but for his own sanity. Already in the darkness of a cell forgotten by everyone, William wakes up with no sense of time or place. All he feels is the cold concrete on his back and the damp smell of the air, as if the mold has even infiltrated his lungs. Every inch of that prison suffocates him, and the only thing that separates him from complete madness is the thin memory of a past he can barely remember. He tries to focus on the few images that remain: a woman's face smiling at him in the sunlight, the laughter of children in an open field. But the memories escape, fleeting, as if they were shadows that evaporate in the gloom. In those first days or weeks, he can no longer tell the difference. William forced himself to remember every detail of his life. But little by little, isolation erased everything. Now he barely remembers who he is. Only an echo of his own name, William, persists. On the wall in front of him, Scratch's mark attempts to tell time. In the beginning, William crossed out a line with each passing day. However, at some point he gave up. How many days, months, or even years had passed? The notion of time has become a meaningless torture. William had lost the habit of counting, just as he had lost the ability to understand why he was there. Captivity gave him no respite, not even a brief explanation. He remembers being kidnapped by faceless figures, but the images are vague, blurred by time and the pain that lives in his body. The first few weeks were a mix of screams, desperate attempts to escape, and vain pleas for someone to listen to him. Now, he sits in a profound silence, as deafening as it is terrifying. Your days are all about waiting. Waiting for something he doesn't know exactly what it is. Death? Rescue? Or just the end of your own sanity? With every sound that comes from outside, your heart races in the hope that someone has found you. But each time the footsteps move away, a part of their hope is ripped away. He screams, sometimes, just to confirm that he can still hear his own voice. But most of the time, all he has is silence. And this silence becomes a cruel companion, occupying every corner of your mind, suffocating every thought of freedom. The food, when given to her, arrives through a small opening in the door. He never sees the face of the person who brings it, just a gloved hand that leaves a dirty plate and quickly disappears, as if even its presence were a contamination. William begins to think that, to those who hold him captive, he is nothing more than a ghost, a shadow that deserves to be forgotten. On one of his rare nights of sleep, he dreams of freedom. You feel the wind hitting your face. You see the blue sky. But the dream quickly turns into a nightmare. The cell walls begin to close in around him, swallowing him again. He wakes up sweating, eyes wide in the darkness, and realizes that the real nightmare doesn't end when he opens his eyes. As time passes, your own voice becomes unrecognizable. When you try to speak, the words seem foreign, a distant memory of a life that may never have been. He begins to doubt his own reality, questioning whether he ever really lived outside of there. Maybe everything was a creation of his mind, a way to escape pain and isolation. But at the same time, something inside him screams that there is truth outside those walls. In this torturous silence, William realizes he is faced with an impossible choice: accept madness as his only companion or fight against it, even if it means facing his own demons. Time continues to pass uncertainly for William, his only companion being the silence that fills every corner of that cell. At some point, he begins to hear sounds in the distance, perhaps coming from other parts of the building or a distant hallway. One day, he hears the sound of a door opening and slow but steady footsteps echoing through the walls. For a brief moment, your heart races. Was this your chance to escape? Or perhaps someone had come to free him. He approaches the door, his ears open, trying to take in every detail. But the footsteps move away, and hope disappears as quickly as it came. He feels a despair he can barely express. The reality of his situation eats away at him like acid. William begins to understand that his greatest enemy is not the walls around him, but time itself. which drags on slowly, testing his resistance. One night, while trying to sleep, a memory appears without warning. He sees his daughter's face, something so clear it makes him catch his breath. He feels the touch of her small hands, remembers the sound of her laugh. She called him Hero Dad, always saying he was the strongest man in the world. But there, in that cell, he feels weak, defeated. The feeling of failure overwhelms him. He wonders what would have happened to her. Would she have continued to believe he was her hero, or would she have forgotten him, just as the world had forgotten him? That night, for the first time, William cries. It is not a soft cry, but an explosion of pain, a release from pent-up despair. Tears run down his face, marking his dirty, worn skin. He sobs until he has no strength left, feeling the weight of loneliness in each tear. And even when there are no more tears, the pain continues, pulsing in your chest like a fragile, worn-out heart. But in that despair, something changes inside him. He begins to understand that if he doesn't resist, if he doesn't fight, he will be accepting his own destruction. The image of her daughter and the world outside becomes a spark of hope. He begins to observe every detail of the cell, looking for something, anything that he could use to escape. Examine every inch of the walls, the cracks, the joints, any weakness in the structure. Days pass, or perhaps weeks, as he mentally devises plans and strategies. But deep down, he knows he's playing against impossible odds. The walls are solid, the floor is firm, and the silence remains relentless. Even so, he decides that, as long as he still has strength, he will continue fighting. In a moment of clarity, William feels he needs to prepare himself, both mentally and physically. The only thing he can do to maintain his sanity is imagine himself free, create detailed plans for an eventual escape. And so, day after day, he begins to relive in his mind the route he will take when the opportunity arises, the path that will take him away from the darkness. Your thoughts turn into silent prayers, an appeal to fate or any force you can hear. And on some level, he begins to believe that his liberation is possible. Even though everything around him suggests otherwise, something inside him resists, something that keeps him clinging to a small hope. He closes his eyes and imagines himself outside, walking under the open sky, breathing in the fresh air, finally free. It's an image he holds onto with all his might. William barely distinguishes what is real from what is imagination. The days mix together, a stream of thoughts and visions that he no longer controls. Then, one night, a sound snaps him out of this daze. It's a murmur, an almost inaudible voice that passes through the thickness of the walls. He holds his breath, struggling to understand, at first thinking it's another trick of his exhausted mind. But the voice persists, a soft, steady whisper that seems to be coming from the cell next door. Someone speaks, murmurs softly, perhaps to himself or perhaps to him. William feels a wave of emotion, so strong that it almost makes him collapse. He is not alone. This revelation is like a spark that ignites something in his soul, a survival drive he thought he had lost. For a few moments, he hesitates, afraid that this is just an illusion. But the need for contact, for a human connection, is stronger than his fear. He approaches the wall, pressing his ear against the cold concrete, and whispers back, with the husky voice of someone who has almost forgotten how to communicate. "Who's there?" A long, heavy silence fills the space between the words, as if the other side is as surprised as he is. Then finally the answer comes, a shaky, unsure sound. "My name is Michael, and you?" That simple exchange of words carries unimaginable weight. William feels the tears come again, but he controls them. It's the first time in years that he's heard a name other than his own echo in his mind. A life beyond yours is there, on the other side, and that fact is both liberating and cruel. Liberating because it proves that he is not the only one forgotten. Cruel because it means another human being is going through the same torment. In the days that follow, William and Michael talk whenever they can, in whispers, as if they fear that some invisible watchman might hear. Little by little, they share fragmented stories, memories worn by time. Michael talks about his wife, who was waiting for him at home that fateful night he was captured, and the son he may never see again. In return, William talks about his daughter, her smile, and how she used to call him a hero. Their stories intertwine like tenuous threads, forming a web of memories that keeps them anchored to reality. But as they share their stories, they both realize something unsettling. Neither of their memories includes a clear reason for their imprisonment. Both were ripped from their lives without explanation, as if someone had chosen them at random, like pieces in an insane game they can't understand. This generates a suffocating anguish, a question that repeats in their minds. Why them? What crime did they commit to deserve such punishment? As the conversations progress, the friendship between William and Michael turns into a silent pact. They decide that if an opportunity ever arises, they will try to escape together. The idea of freedom becomes something real, even if distant, a goal that helps them endure daily suffering. And as they make vague plans for escape, they begin to imagine a future where their families may still be waiting for them. On one of these nights of whispers, Michael confides something to William. He once heard one of the guards mentioning that no one survives more than 5 years in that place. For William, this is a devastating blow. He's been there for 5 years. He feels the weight of the sentence, the proximity of the end, but at the same time, Michael's friendship renews his desire to fight, his determination to prove that he will not be just another forgotten prisoner. William knows he doesn't have much time, but now he has something he never had before, an ally, someone who shares your suffering and your desires for freedom. And together, perhaps they have a chance, even if minimal, of surviving what seems impossible. The nights pass like ghosts for William, who now waits fervently for Michael's whispers. These whispers are all that keep his heart beating, the only thing that reminds him that he still belongs to something bigger than the cold walls around him. Michael's presence brings relief and, at the same time, an overwhelming responsibility. For the first time, William feels that he cannot give in to madness, because there is someone by his side, even if invisible, who depends on him. And this tenuous, almost invisible connection is the most precious thing the two have. One night, while the silence hangs heavy, William takes the risk of talking about his family. He describes his daughter with such passion that even the darkness seems less dense. She had a smile that could light up the world, he says, his voice broken but full of emotion. Every time she smiled at me, I felt invincible. I was her father, her hero. He pauses, and the next words are spoken with a lump in his throat. But now, I don't even know if she remembers me. Upon hearing this, Michael shares a painful secret. He was about to become a father when he was captured. He never met his son, never felt the weight of the baby in his arms or heard his first cry. The pain of never having been part of your own child's life is a blow that never heals. Sometimes I feel like my son doesn't even exist, as if everything was a dream that I created to survive. The words are whispered, but each syllable seems to hurt more than any physical wound. For both, family represents both an anchor and a sharp blade, which cuts deep into each memory. Shared memories become a ritual. Each night, they exchange fragments of their lives, pieces of happiness that once existed and that now torture and sustain them at the same time. Pain, paradoxically, turns into hope. They come to believe that if they survive, they can take back those lives, regain those moments that were stolen from them. And it is this hope that gives them the strength necessary to endure the unbearable. One morning, William feels a new energy within him. Friendship with Michael planted a seed of resistance that grows every day. He begins to perform physical exercises inside his tiny cell, strengthening his body for an escape that is still just a fantasy, but that already exists in his mind as a possibility. Every squat, every push-up is a silent promise that he won't give in easily. The physical pain, the sweat running down his face, the muscles trembling, these are all signs that he is still alive. And at the same time, it's as if he's regaining a piece of the dignity that his captivity tried to steal from him. He whispers to himself, "I'm going to get out of here. I will see her again." And he repeats it so many times that the phrase becomes a mantra, a prayer that he carries in his heart. On the other side of the wall, Michael realizes what is happening and joins him. They create a routine in silence, synchronizing their movements, feeling connected in a way that defies isolation and despair. Every drop of sweat is an affirmation that they are still men, they're still fathers, they still have something to lose and something to fight for. But with hope also comes fear. William feels his anxiety rising, as if every step toward freedom brings with it the possibility of failure. He remembers the lifeless looks he once saw on other prisoners, souls who couldn't bear the weight of waiting and let their sanity slip away. The fear of becoming one of them, of being just another life erased into oblivion, haunts him. Then, on a particularly dark night, he hears something that makes his heart stop. Michael's heavy breathing, increasingly labored and irregular. The absolute silence around amplifies the sound, turning it into a distressing echo. Michael's voice comes out weak, shaky. "William, I don't know how much longer I can resist." Those words pierce William like a knife. He knows that Michael is his anchor, the last line that holds him steady. If he loses Michael, he will lose himself. He whispers urgently, as if he could transmit life through walls. "You will survive, Michael. We're both going to get out of here. I promise you." The weight of that promise is almost unbearable, but William feels he needs to believe in it as much as his friend does. And as he repeats the words, he feels a determination rising, a certainty born of desperation. Now, it's no longer just for his daughter or his own freedom. He needs to survive for Michael, for that friendship that became his only hope in the midst of darkness. And that night, for the first time, they decide they will act. Escape, which was once just a dream, now becomes a necessity. They outline the beginning of a plan, a set of almost insane steps that seem impossible but offer a chance. For the first time, the cell doesn't seem so impenetrable. There are cracks in the darkness, and through those cracks, William sees the first glimmer of freedom. After years of silence and submission, William and Michael finally have a plan, albeit a risky one full of loopholes. The idea of an escape brings an adrenaline rush that almost makes their bodies forget the marks of captivity. The feeling of resistance against the oppression that has surrounded them for so long is like a lit flame, a force pulsing through their veins. It is a spark that is reborn every day, fueled by friendship and the need for freedom. William begins to observe every detail of his cell with a clinical eye, looking for signs that could indicate structural weakness. Every crack, every mark on the wall or floor is analyzed, memorized, as if he could see an invisible map to the exit. The cell that was once a passive prison is now a battlefield, and he is willing to fight every inch of that structure. In moments of silence, he taps lightly on the walls, trying to hear any sound that betrays a hollow space, a point that could be vulnerable. The anguish of failing, however, is constant, like a shadow that follows you. The memory of other prisoners, men he saw wither and give up, haunts his mind. But William forces himself to push those thoughts away. He has no choice. The possibility of a life beyond the walls of that cell is the only thing that separates him from complete despair. It's more than him, more than Michael. It is a fight for dignity, for the survival of everything that still remains in their hearts. Each step of the plan is whispered carefully, details being shared across walls. Michael is her confidant, her partner every step of the way, and they both realize they need to time each movement precisely. Any mistake, no matter how small, could mean the end of both. The tension is constant, a taut rope that could break at any moment. And despite his fear, William feels something he hasn't felt in years: hope. The simple act of believing that it is possible to get out of there already seems like a victory. On one of the nights when they discuss the final details, Michael mentions his fragile health that has been deteriorating. His breathing is labored, as if the weight of years in the cell has eaten away at his lungs. William feels a panic arise, a new urgency. He needs to get Michael out of there as soon as possible. It's not just a matter of escaping. It's a matter of saving your friend's life. The prison becomes a living beast, a hungry creature that threatens to swallow Michael at any moment. And William refuses to let that happen. Reality, however, gives them no respite. The walls are solid, imposing, and the guards circulate through the corridor at irregular intervals, which makes carrying out the plan even more risky. But the will to live overcomes any obstacle. William and Michael decide that the first step is to build up their physical and mental strength. Every piece of food, every sip of water is used as if it were a precious resource. Patience, they know, is their greatest ally. Finally, the day comes when they decide to try. Night falls and absolute silence reigns, only broken by the distant footsteps of the guards. William presses his ear against the door, waiting for the exact moment when the hallway becomes empty. On the other side, Michael does the same, synchronizing his breathing with his. Adrenaline pulses, and William feels his heart hammering against his chest. He is on the verge of a decision that could be his last, but it is a decision he refuses to avoid. They begin the process of removing some loose stones from the wall, something William noticed months ago and kept as a vital secret. Each movement is made cautiously, hands shaking with nervousness and anxiety. The feeling of reaching an exit, even if uncertain, is powerful. The wall seems to give way a little, and that is a small victory, but progress is slow and exhausting. Every second seems to last an eternity, and every noise makes them both freeze in fear. In a moment of pause, William whispers to Michael, "If we leave here, the first thing we will do is breathe the air of freedom together." Michael responds with a smile that William can almost feel through the wall. "I need to see my son, William. I need to have the chance to be a father." These words are a poignant reminder of what is at stake. They are not just escaping from a physical prison. They are trying to escape a death sentence for the soul. The wall begins to give way more, and the small opening gives William a glimpse of the other side, a faint light that looks promising. But at the same time, reality imposes itself. Escape will not be easy, and they are still far from escaping. Each advance is accompanied by a new difficulty, but both are determined. Now, more than ever, they know that they are fighting for something that transcends the simple desire for freedom. They are fighting for their lives, for their families, and for what is left of their identities. That night, as the first ray of hope shines in both their eyes, they realize that the fight is just beginning. Prison hurt them deeply, but it also strengthened them in ways neither could have predicted. And from now on, every step, every effort will be proof of your resilience and your desire to live. The small opening in the wall that William and Michael managed to create is like a sigh of freedom. It's a tiny advance, but enough to reignite the strength within them. That night, as they both watch the small crevice, they share a silence full of meaning. The presence of a path, however narrow and uncertain, is the first proof that the prison can be defeated. William feels like his efforts have paid off, and for the first time in years, he allows himself to feel a surge of genuine hope. During the following days, every free moment is dedicated to widening that opening. William does everything he can to preserve what little energy he has left, focusing on small actions to strengthen his muscles atrophied by captivity. He knows the plan will demand the most of his body, and the strength he finds is like a fire that refuses to go out. Michael, on the other side, struggles with his failing health, but reborn hope seems to revitalize him. The two became inseparable allies, warriors on a silent battlefield. Each night, they advance a few millimeters, chipping away chunks of stone with meticulous patience, an almost ritualistic process. And each time they manage to expand the crack, they exchange imaginary looks of satisfaction, as if they could see each other through the walls. For them, the sound of stones being removed is a melody of freedom, a reminder that even though prison has tried to erase them, they still have control over their own lives. However, the weight of the plan begins to weigh more and more on William. He is consumed by the fear that Michael will not survive until the end. You feel his breathing, becoming weaker and weaker, more and more labored, and the sound torments you like a dark warning that time is running out. Their friendship has become something sacred, a bond that transcends space and darkness, but which is now threatened by the fragility of Michael's body. One night, William hears his friend's dry cough and feels tightness in his chest. He knows he needs to act quickly. Michael isn't just his cellmate. He is the emotional anchor that has kept him sane. Without Michael, William fears that despair will take over his mind and destroy him. His heart racing, he whispers through the crack, "Hold on tight, Michael. We're almost there. You're gonna get out of here?" Michael's response is a faint murmur, barely audible, but filled with unexpected tenderness. "Thank you, William. You gave me a reason to fight. And if I get out of here, I promise I'll find my family again. I want to meet my son." William feels tears burning in his eyes when he hears those words. He knows he needs to do everything in his power to make this promise a reality. The next morning, a different sound invades the usual silence in the hallway. There are footsteps, heavy, dragging, and voices that William doesn't recognize. He approaches the opening and watches carefully, noticing that the guards seem more tense than usual, as if they are under special orders. This change worries him. Something is about to happen, and he fears it will be a transfer or worse, a permanent end for him and Michael. With his heart racing, he warns Michael, and the two agree that they must act more quickly than planned. William realizes that they may have to improvise, even if it means taking bigger risks. The sound of footsteps and voices continues to echo, a constant reminder that time is running out. The pressure builds, and the tension in the air becomes palpable. That night, as they continue to excavate the crevasse, William's thoughts turn to his daughter. He remembers the sunny days in the park, the innocence of your smile, and the sparkle in your eyes when you saw him get home. These memories consume him, the longing burning like an open wound. He promises himself that he will see her again. Every knock on the wall is a silent promise that he won't let his past disappear. He refuses to accept that those happy moments will only be memories. Finally, after hours of effort, the crack widens enough for William to peek at what's on the other side. His vision is limited, but he notices a dark hallway that leads to a narrow staircase. It is the path that can lead them to freedom. The possibility of getting out of there, of breathing the fresh air and seeing the sky again, fills him with an energy that he almost no longer recognizes. Michael, however, is exhausted, his strength almost gone. William knows that time is even more precious now. "We're almost there, Michael. Just a little more. I promise. We'll get out of here together." William's words are like a solemn oath, a promise he will do his utmost to keep. In that night, the two companions prepare for what could be the last and most dangerous stage of their journey. The light of freedom finally seems within reach, but the path is treacherous, and they know that once they take the next step, there will be no turning back. It's all or nothing, and in their hearts, they both carry the certainty that if they die trying, at least they will die as men who refuse to submit, men who fought to the end. The dawn is dense and silent, as if time itself were standing still, awaiting William and Michael's decision. The opening in the wall is now large enough to allow a risky escape, but the once meticulous plan now turns out to be more dangerous than anyone expected. On the other side, the hallway is dark, but not empty. Guards patrol regularly, and the tension they have noticed in the previous days increases with each minute. Michael is leaning against the wall, his face pale and covered in cold sweat. The cough that haunts him has become more intense, and William realizes that the effort of excavating the wall has drained the last of his friend's strength. Every groan of pain, every heavy sigh from Michael are like knives that reach William's heart. He feels helpless, but tries to remain calm, knowing that any sign of weakness could ruin everything. William crouches down next to Michael and touches his shoulder firmly, trying to convey the strength he feels disappearing every day. "We're close, Michael. We just need a little more." Michael, in response, smiles weakly, a smile that is a mixture of gratitude and farewell, something William cannot bear to see. He knows that Michael's health is fragile, but he refuses to accept the possibility of losing his friend at that moment. They wait for the right moment, counting the minutes in absolute silence. When the last round passes through the corridor, The two exchange a meaningful look and begin to slide through the opening. Each movement is a test of endurance, tired and injured bodies forced to move forward. William advances first, with Michael close behind, both moving slowly, fearing any noise that would give away their presence. The hallway is dark and oppressive, and each step brings back memories of years of captivity. William feels as if the shadows around him are whispering to him, an echo of the voices that kept him awake on desperate nights. But now, with Michael by her side, freedom seems close enough to touch. The journey, however, is just beginning, and every second seems to drag on like a cruel test of your strength. As they approach the staircase that they saw through the opening, Michael trips and almost falls, but William catches him, supporting him as carefully as he can. "I'm not leaving you here, Michael," he whispers, determined. Michael nods slightly, a gesture that conveys more tiredness than words could express. Michael's fragility awakens a desperate urgency in William. He needs to get him out of there as quickly as possible. Climbing the stairs, each step seems like an eternity. William feels the weight of Michael's body, which now needs to be practically carried, his friend no longer having the strength to support his own weight. But with each effort, he is driven by a promise, a force greater than fear. He swore to himself that Michael would see his son, that they would both feel the warmth of the sun again. It's a sacred promise, and he won't give up on it. Reaching the top of the stairs, they find a wide hallway lit by a cold, pale light. William realizes they are dangerously exposed. With nowhere to hide, the tension increases, and both of their hearts beat in a frantic rhythm. Then, they see a door at the end of the hallway. It seems to be the only possible way out. The two exchange a determined look. It's all or nothing. William supports Michael against the wall, whispering to him to wait there for a moment as he moves forward to inspect the place. With slow, silent steps, he approaches the door, trying not to make any noise. But before he can touch it, a shadow appears on the other side. He backs away quickly, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his body like an electric current. They are so close to freedom, but the presence of nearby guards puts them in a stalemate. William turns to Michael, his eyes full of urgency and anguish. Michael looks at him, his expression tired, but with silent determination. "Go, William," he says, his voice weak but resolute. "If I can't make it, at least one of us needs to leave." William shakes his head, refusing to abandon his friend. The thought of leaving without Michael is unbearable, a burden he knows he could never carry. He whispers firmly, "I didn't come here to leave you. We're going to get out of here together." The plan is adjusted in an instant. They decide that they need to distract the guards so that they can both get through. William picks up a piece of stone from the ground and throws it to the opposite side of the corridor, creating a noise that attracts the attention of the guards. As soon as they walk away, William helps Michael to his feet, and the two move with quick, silent steps towards the door. William's heart beats so hard that he fears the sound will be audible. He holds Michael's shoulder tightly, whispering words of encouragement as they go. And then, finally, they reach the door. William pushes it slowly, praying it's unlocked. With a slight click, it opens, revealing what appears to be a staircase leading outside. The sight of a possible way out makes both of their eyes shine. They feel the cold breeze that comes through the crack, a touch of freedom that makes their hearts speed up even more. The last stage is before them, and hope, so fragile and at the same time so powerful, turns into an irresistible impulse. They don't know what they will find outside, but they know that together they are willing to risk everything. The cold air, escaping through the opening in the door, is the first sense of freedom William and Michael have experienced in years. The icy breeze touches their faces like a whisper of hope, invigorating their exhausted bodies. The stairs leading outside are narrow and poorly lit, but the glimpse of an exit is all they need to rally their remaining forces. Each step they descend is a fight against tiredness, pain, and fear. William supports Michael, practically carrying his friend who can barely stand. Michael breathes hard, each step a painful effort, but William's presence at his side keeps him moving. The friendship between the two transformed into something beyond time and space. They are like brothers, united by the same desperate need for freedom. When they finally reach the bottom of the stairs, they are faced with a new barrier, an iron grate that seems to be the last obstacle between them and the outside world. William feels despair begin to rise in his throat, but he refuses to give in. Look around for anything that can help clear the way. His hands shake as he examines the railing, trying to find a weakness, a loophole. Michael watches his friend with bleary eyes, his expression tired and pained. "William, if it doesn't work out, just go," he whispers. But William faces him with fierce determination. "Don't say that. We'll both get out of here, together." William's voice is a solemn promise, a refusal to let fate destroy them so close to freedom. He finds an improvised tool, a piece of iron loose from the handrail, and begins to force the railing, using all the strength his body still has. The seconds seem to drag by, each attempt to move the grate a monumental effort. But William persists, fueled by an unshakable will to survive. Michael helps him as best he can, but his body no longer responds. Even so, his presence at William's side is an invisible force that drives him to continue. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the grate gives way, opening with a metallic creak that echoes through the space. William and Michael exchange a look, a mix of surprise and relief. The passage is clear. They hurry, crossing the opening with hurried, cautious steps, feeling freedom at their fingertips. Outside, the darkness of night envelopes them. It's a strange and familiar world at the same time. After being trapped for so long, the sky seems immense, and the stars are like small points of hope scattered on the horizon. William takes a deep breath, fresh air filling his lungs as if he is taking his first breath. He feels freedom with an almost overwhelming intensity, a reality that hits him like a powerful wave. Michael, however, is too weak to enjoy the moment. His body falters, and William catches him before he falls. The friend is exhausted, and the dry cough rips through his throat with a violence that scares William. "Hang in there, Michael. We are free. We're almost there," he murmurs, trying to keep his voice steady, but the concern is evident. Michael forces a smile, holding William's hand with what little strength he has left. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Those words are everything to William. He feels the weight of responsibility, but also the deep gratitude for having someone by his side, someone who didn't let him give up. Together, they advance through the dark landscape, trying to get as far away from the place they just fled as possible. Each step is a fight against fatigue, the exhausted body resisting the urge to stop. But their newfound freedom is like powerful fuel, and they don't stop. However, William notices that Michael is weakening by the moment, his breathing becoming shallower and more irregular. He knows he needs to find help for his friend, something that can save him. The thought of losing Michael now, after everything they've been through together, is unbearable. He supports him, practically carrying him, his steps becoming slower and more hesitant. With each look he exchanges with his friend, William feels his anguish grow. He needs to keep Michael alive. He needs to repay the sacrifice his friend made by enduring years of captivity. When they finally find a deserted road, William feels a surge of hope. It's a path to life, to the world, but it's also a risky bet. He knows that any move could draw attention, and any mistake could take them both back to the nightmare they just left behind. Still, they have no choice. William lifts Michael onto his shoulders, determination on his face like a promise to his friend. They manage to escape, and now it's a question of survival. A car headlight appears in the distance, and William, on a desperate impulse, raises his hand, waving. The vehicle approaches slowly, and he feels his heart accelerate. He doesn't know if he can trust whoever is behind the wheel, but the need to save Michael speaks louder. When the car finally stops, William observes the driver, a man with a surprised and concerned expression. "Please help my friend. He's hurt," William says, his voice cracking with effort. The driver hesitates for a moment, but the desperation in William's eyes seems to convince him. He opens the door, helping them inside, and William feels a wave of relief like he's never felt before. The feeling of security is almost surreal, and he knows that for the first time in years, they are finally on their way to a new life. The car drives along the deserted roads while William holds Michael in his arms, watching his friend with an anguish that eats him up inside. Michael is pale, his breathing weak and uneven, his eyes barely staying open. William whispers words of encouragement, promises of a better future, but he himself feels the weight of uncertainty. He doesn't know if they will be able to get to a hospital in time. He doesn't know if the freedom they have just won will be enough to save Michael's life. The driver, realizing the gravity of the situation, accelerates the car, the worried look on William's face reflecting the despair of that journey. The silence in the vehicle is broken only by Michael's ragged breathing and William's hurried murmurs, who refuses to accept the possibility of losing his friend. "Hang in there, Michael. We're almost there. You will see your son, I promise." The minutes drag by like an eternity, and each one of them seems to increase the tension in William's chest. He squeezes Michael's hand, trying to convey strength, love, and everything that was built between them during those years of captivity. Friendship, forged in desperation, became an anchor, a reason to endure the suffering that gnawed at them for 5 years. Now, seeing Michael so vulnerable is like part of himself is dying. The road seems endless, but they finally see the lights of a small town on the horizon. The driver, sensing the urgency, doubles his speed, and William feels a fragile hope begin to form in his heart. He looks at Michael, who tries to open his eyes with effort, his lips forming a weak smile. "You were a good friend, William. Without you, I wouldn't have gotten this far." Michael's words are like a punch. William feels a pang of despair and refuses to accept the tone of farewell in his friend's voice. "Don't say that, Michael. Let's get out of this. Let's see our families together." He holds Michael's hand tightly, as if that gesture was enough to keep him tethered to life. The promise of freedom is not just a word. It's the oath he made to himself and Michael, a promise that needs to be kept. Finally, the car stops in front of the hospital, a small and modest building, but which seems to be their last hope. William jumps out of the car and desperately asks for help. Nurses and doctors come running, and William watches as they place Michael on a stretcher and carry him inside. He tries to follow, but is stopped. The driver, who has stayed by William's side the entire ride, places a hand on his shoulder and offers a look of silent support. William sits alone in the waiting room, the silence crushing, his mind flooded with memories of his years of captivity. Every moment of pain, every whispered conversation with Michael through the cell walls, every promise that they would escape together plays through her mind like a movie. He feels uncontrollable anguish at the thought that, despite all his struggle, destiny could lead him to lose his friend. The hours pass slowly, and the wait becomes a test of patience and endurance. Finally, a doctor appears, and William's heart races as he tries to decipher the expression on his face. The doctor, with a sympathetic look, informs that Michael is in critical condition, but that there is hope. The words sound like an incomplete relief, but enough for William to allow himself to breathe again. He closes his eyes, a silent tear running down his face. The gratitude for the chance to save his friend is as intense as the suffering he experienced during his years in prison. Over the next few days, William visits Michael whenever possible. His friend is still unconscious, but every time he sits next to him, William holds his hand and repeats the promises they both made. It talks about Michael's son, about the freedom they sought so much, and about the days of peace they hope to live. He knows recovery will be slow, but for the first time in a long time, they have a real chance to live a life that isn't ruled by fear and pain. Finally, one morning, Michael opens his eyes, and the sight of his friend awake is the greatest relief William could feel. He holds Michael's hand, their smiles filled with an emotion that transcends words. The two survivors share a deep look, a silent pact that nothing will be able to separate them again. Michael, still weak, smiles with difficulty. "You brought me back, William. Thank you for never giving up." William feels his chest tighten, a mixture of pain and gratitude that almost suffocates him. He responds with a choked voice. We promised each other we would go out together. I could never leave him behind. The two friends, now in a moment of peace, feel that the prison that separated them for years has finally been left behind. They are free not just physically, but emotionally, freed from the invisible chains that kept them bound. It's the beginning of a new life, and they both know that, regardless of the challenges that lie ahead, they will always have each other. The experience marked them forever, but at the same time, it transformed them into men who know the true value of freedom and friendship. The pain and suffering are behind them, and in front of them is an entire world waiting to be rediscovered. Days pass, and Michael's recovery is slow but steady. William remains by his side, a solid and comforting presence, like an anchor that keeps his friend connected to reality. The physical scars begin to heal, but they both know that the emotional scars will be deeper. The years of captivity left each of them with invisible wounds, memories that refuse to disappear. But now, with freedom in hand, there is something new that sustains them: hope. One morning, Michael is finally allowed to get up, to take his first steps out of his room. With William's help, he slowly walks to the hospital garden, where the fresh air and gentle warmth of the sun embrace them like a long-awaited hug. It's the first time they've seen the blue sky since they were freed, and the simple act of breathing in the open air is a blessing, something they had both almost forgotten. The two exchange a silent look, a deep understanding that this is more than just a moment. It is a symbol that they have finally left behind the darkness that consumed them. William, moved, puts his hand on Michael's shoulder and whispers, "We did it, friend. We are free." Michael just smiles, his eyes full of gratitude and an emotion that doesn't need words to be understood. They're alive, and they're together. That's all that matters now. With Michael's medical discharge, they leave the hospital, ready to start over. William accompanies him to the train station, where they will finally say goodbye. Each one will follow their own path, but the bond between them will never be broken. Michael observes the station around him, the movement of people, the world he left behind so many years ago, and which now seems new and at the same time familiar. "Go see your daughter, William. She needs you, and you need her," Michael says, his voice still weak but filled with renewed strength. William nods, feeling his heart warm at the mention of his daughter. In the years of captivity, he lived for her, for the promise that one day he would see her again, and now that moment is finally near. Before boarding the train, Michael looks at William and makes a silent promise. They both know that, regardless of the distance, they will be present in each other's lives. They are soul brothers, forged by pain, hope, and the fight for freedom. Without further words, they hug, a gesture full of meaning, a goodbye and a see you later at the same time. And, with a heavy and grateful heart, Michael follows his path, determined to find the son he never knew, to regain the life that was stolen from him. When the train leaves, William feels a wave of deep emotion. He watches the horizon, letting the moment settle within him, and finally takes the course that will take him back home. His daughter is waiting for him, and he promises himself that he will be the father he always wanted to be, the man who survived hell and came back stronger, more whole. Coming home is like a dream. He can't believe it when he sees the familiar door in front of him, the open windows, and the sound of laughter in the distance. He trembles as he reaches out to knock on the door, his heart racing, a mixture of nervousness and joy surrounding him. After a few seconds, the door opens, and he finds himself in front of the person he imagined during all his years of captivity, his daughter, now a young girl, but with the same smile he remembered. She watches him for a moment in disbelief, as if she were facing a ghost. But soon her eyes fill with tears, and she runs into his arms, wrapping him in a tight hug, full of longing, pain, and intense happiness. William feels his heart explode with emotion, and for the first time in a long time, he allows himself to cry openly, without fear, without shame. It is a liberation, a purification of the pains that haunted him. They spend hours together, talking, laughing, and sharing the stories they never had the chance to tell. William realizes that despite the time they lost, there is still a lot to build, a lot to live for. He feels like he has finally found his home, not just within the walls of that house, but in the love that unites him with his daughter, in the promise of a future that can now be rewritten. As the weeks pass, William adapts to his new life. He knows the scars will remain, that the memories will haunt him on lonely nights, but that doesn't stop him from moving on. The prison that tried to destroy his humanity has failed, and he refuses to be just a victim. Now he is a survivor, a man who has regained his life. And one fine day, he receives a letter from Michael. The words written with a trembling hand speak of a reconciliation, of a reunion between father and son, of a life that is also being rebuilt. William reads the letter with tears in his eyes, knowing that although they are far apart, they still share the same bond, the same victory over suffering. Standing in the backyard, under the open sky and warm sun, William closes his eyes and breathes deeply. The life he has regained is everything he ever wanted. Freedom, which once seemed like an unattainable dream, is now your reality. He feels peace in his chest, a peace that comes from the certainty that he will never be trapped again. The journey was arduous, and the pain was immense, but William knows it was all worth it. He survived, and now he is free to live, to love, and to rebuild every piece of his existence. And as he watches the horizon, he murmurs one last promise to himself. He will live each day intensely, in honor of all those who still seek freedom, because he has finally found his.
If this story captured and moved you, don't forget to like the video, share with those who love intense stories like this, and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing more narratives that will surprise you and stir your emotions. Don't miss the next chapter of this incredible journey.